This is You've Already Been Hacked, recorded on 8 May 2021. All right, this week, as I was sitting down to pull together the script for the show, a new attack landed in our lap. A major US fuel pipeline has halted operations. Colonial Pipeline, the operator of a major pipeline system that transports fuel across the East Coast, said Saturday, that's today, everybody, the 8th of May, that it had been victimized by a ransomware attack and that it had halted all pipeline operations to deal with the threat. The attack is unlikely to affect gas supply and prices unless it leads to a prolonged shutdown of the pipeline. Colonial has not said who demanded, but the ransomware attacks are typically carried out by cyber criminals who seize data and demand large payments. So, I mean, it could be any of the wonderful folks that we've talked about, including nation-state actors at this point. Colonial has stated that this pipeline delivers roughly 45% of all the fuel consumed on the East Coast. And this attack underscores again the vulnerabilities of the United States' critical infrastructure to cyber attacks. Now, like I said at the lead-in, this happened on Saturday. Now, that's the disclosure. Colonial stated that the ransomware attack officially occurred Friday, affecting some IT systems, and that they moved, quote, proactively to take certain systems offline, which included the full halting of pipeline operations. So Colonial is saying they did that because of the attack. At least that's what they're disclosing. Oil analysts have stated that the impact of an attack on fuel supplies and prices depends on how long the pipeline is down. So, for an example, something that lasts just a couple days would have relatively a minimal impact, but an outage that lasts 5-6 days could cause shortages and price hikes, particularly in the area stretching from central Alabama to Washington, D.C. Not a small trough of land. But it's not just land or energy that's the problem, it's also air. So one key concern about a lengthy delay would be the supply of jet fuel needed to keep major airports operating, like the ones in Atlanta, Charlotte, Virginia, specifically Northern Virginia, a la Dulles, just as some examples. And as we've seen time and time again over recent years, more and more critical infrastructure is becoming connected to the industrial Internet of Things. This is problematic. IT experts wide and large say that operational technology systems and administrative systems and the Internet should be separated. However, we see that more and more are coming online. This is why an attack like this is happening today. And if Colonial was prepared, as many in the energy sector tend to spend a little bit more than everybody else, it may not be that bad, but we simply just don't know yet. Don't worry, though. Critical infrastructure is not the only thing that has alarms and concerns of recent. If you own a Dell, or if your company owns a Dell, or has had a Dell in it since 2009, there is a new firmware update that is absolutely essential due to some recently discovered vulnerabilities. Hundreds of millions of Dell laptops, notebooks, and tablets are at risk of compromise from a set of 5 highly severe flaws that have been undetected since 2009. That's the bad news. The good news is the attacker needed to have some level of initial access on the system to escalate privileges to gain control level of what's known as kernel level access to the system. So if they didn't have initial access, you're okay. But if they were able to get in through another attack vector, maybe not so okay. Dell has issued a remediation as part of a driver affecting certain Windows-based Dell computers. And they have stated they have seen no evidence in the vulnerability in the wild from any actor to date. Researchers at Sentinel-1 are the ones that discovered the vulnerabilities while investigating the security posture of a specific Dell driver. This driver has been in use since 2009. The security vendor described Dell as having included the vulnerability driver in BIOS update utilities for literally hundreds of millions of businesses and consumer computers over the last 12 years. Now, Sentinel says 4 of the 5 vulnerabilities in the driver were local elevation of privileges, and one resulted in a denial of service condition if it was exploited. 2 of the privilege escalation flaws resulted from a memory corruption issue, and the other 2 stemmed from a lack of input validation. The denial of service bug, meanwhile, resulted from some code logic issue. All the vulnerabilities are different, and they range from trivial to complex. But as we all know, an attacker only needs to be right once, and now they have 5 chances on hundreds of millions of computers. And just for note, it's not just Dell, it's also, for you gamers out there, Alienware laptops, since Dell took over that brand. So if you have an Alienware that's been made within the last 12 years, you may want to take a look at it as well, because it may have this Dell driver in it that you need to do an update with. So while you sit there mouth agape of shock and you're desperately running your Dell update utility to try and get the vulnerability fixes, and you're asking yourself, why? Why was my computer vulnerable? Why was any Dell computer vulnerable for 12 years? Well, code base that Dell uses, and this is not uncommon in large corporations, they get big. They get really big. So to have some errors somewhere along the way in the code, it's possible. And if the code has been added to or amended or changed over the last decade plus, maybe new things came up that missed the validation check of some sort, if they were even looking that far back. So, yeah, bad on Dell, but good on them for fixing it as fast as they could once they were alerted to it. A biomolecular European research institute was infected with the Ryuk ransomware. However, it was traced back to pirated software. A student attempted to pirate an expensive data visualization software. That led to the full-blown Ryuk ransomware attack at that research institute. The attack lost the institute a week of research data and a week-long outage as servers were rebuilt from scratch and data restored from backups. Sophos was the company called in to mitigate and perform the autopsy, and after performing the forensics, they determined that the initial point of entry for the threat actors was an RDP session using a student's credentials. After gaining access to the student's laptop, the cybercriminals analyzed the student's browser history. They learned what the student was searching for. They found that he was looking for this visualization software that they used at work and wanted to install on his home computer. So instead of buying a license for a few $100s, the student searched for a cracked version and downloaded it from a Warez website. Now, Warez, for those that don't know, is just a hacker term for illegally or cracked software that you can install without having to pay for the license. The student, however, instead of receiving the software he expected to, or she, don't know for a fact, they were infected with an information-stealing Trojan that logged keystrokes, stole the Windows clipboard history, and stole passwords, including some credentials used by the Ryuk threat actors to log into the institute. Now, it's unlikely that the actors here were the ones that created the Ryuk codebase, because Windows credentials get stolen, sadly, all the time, and get posted on the internet and in black market websites selling credentials for as little as $3 a piece. The folks at Bleeping Computer were recently provided access to leaked data from UAS, which is one of the largest Windows remote desktop credential marketplaces. The data showed that over the past 3 years, 1.3 million accounts were put up for sale on the marketplace, providing a massive pool of victims for threat actors to target. The moral of the story here is make sure that your security implementation on your both ends, both on the client and on the server side, are well in hand, right? Multi-factor authentication for remote desktop connections, restrict access to specific locations or resources or IP addresses, and have all of that type of stuff contained. And if they would have done that, uh, it's likely that this attack would not have prevailed. A type of attack we haven't talked about in a very long time, a DDoS attack, has affected the Belgian government, education institutions, and other sites. The large-scale incident happened earlier this week against Belnet and other ISPs and has sent a wave of internet disruption across numerous Belgian government, scientific, and educational institutions. Belnet has restored its service after a massive denial of service disruption that occurred earlier this week. So everybody's back online. And cut off, but this disruption cut off internet access to, like we said, the government, public, scientific, educational agencies, including Belgium's parliament and some law enforcement agencies. In the initial parts of this investigation so far, it looks like this was a coordinated effort targeting the Belgian government, and it also affected other ISPs in what seems to be the largest DDoS attack in the country's history. Belgium is the headquarters of the European Union and thus a key hub of activity and decision-making for global politics. So were they really going after the Belgian government, or were they trying to slow down the EU? Another point of interest at this juncture is that it doesn't look like the attackers were actually trying to get anything. It looks like the sole purpose of this was aimed at saturating the network to disrupt traffic. So I wonder what was happening on Tuesday when all of this went down. If anyone knows, please respond, and let's talk about it. Where we started today. Industrial control and operational technology systems, right? Well, Microsoft researchers have found about 25 as of yet undocumented critical memory allocation vulnerabilities across a number of vendor IoT and industrial devices that threat actors could exploit to execute malicious code across a network or cause an entire system to crash. Microsoft is dubbing the newly discovered family of vulnerabilities Bad Alec. Microsoft's Section 52, which is the Azure Defender for IoT Security Research Group, said the flaws have the potential to affect a wide range of domains, from consumer and medical IoT devices to industrial IoT operational technology and industrial control systems, according to the report published online this past Thursday. From what researchers have found, the problem is systemic, so it can exist in various aspects of devices, including real-time operating systems, embedded software developer kits, and C, standard library, or libc implementations. And as IoT and OT devices are highly pervasive, quote, these vulnerabilities, if successfully exploited, represent a significant potential risk for organizations of all kinds, unquote. The researchers at Section 52 said they have not seen any vulnerabilities as yet exploited in the wild. And all the research has been disclosed to vendors who have known devices affected through the responsible disclosure effort led by the Microsoft research team and the Department of Homeland Security. A separate advisory from CISA includes a full list of affected devices, which comprise a number of products from Texas Instruments, as well as others from ARM, Samsung, and Amazon, and pick your other list of vendors. Of that list, 25 devices, 15, luckily, already have updates. Some vendors do not expect to have updates to fix the problem for various reasons, and others will release fixes at a later date, according to the advisory. And CISA, without hands tied, that's not what I'm trying to say. They're good people over there. The advice they've given, though, is the same advice they give time and time again with this sort of stuff, right? Minimize network exposure for all control system devices uh, to ensure that they are not directly accessible by the internet. They also advise system administrators practice network segmentation and isolate system networks and remove devices from business networks, as well as putting them behind firewalls. And if remote access is required, use a secure method like a VPN. This is the standard type of things we tell people to do over and over and over. And if you do these things and you have this layered defense, you become a much harder target. You also have to make sure that your employees are trained well enough to use all of these defensive measures in their daily work. And finally, something that's a little more dramatic, a little more movie-esque. Chinese hackers infiltrated Russian submarine defense contractors. Hackers suspected to work for the Chinese government have used a new malware called PortDoor to infiltrate the systems of an engineering company that designed submarines for the Russian Navy. They used a spear phishing email specifically crafted to lure the general director of the company into opening a malicious document. They went right after the big fish. So it's not just spear phishing. The other term for this, when you go after someone of that importance, is called whale phishing. In this case, the method used for delivering the backdoor that was installed on the defense contractor's network was a weaponized, rich text format document attached to an email addressed to the company's CEO. The email, or the lore, was a general description for an autonomous underwater vehicle. When the RTF is opened, it will execute the backdoor, and it puts a file, Microsoft Word puts a file into the Microsoft Word startup folder, disguising it as an add-in file called winlog.wll. And PortDoor is not a lightweight backdoor. It is a full-fledged open the gates sort of scenario. What does it do? Well, it will do reconnaissance of the network. It will profile victim systems. It will download other payloads from command and control servers. It will do privilege escalation. It will do dynamic API resolving to evade static detection methods. It will do 1-byte XOR encryption, which is sensitive data configuration. So you won't see what it's taking because it will be encrypted out. And it uses AES encrypted data in that exfil. Yikes. Security researchers at Cybereason are the ones that are making the claim, or alleging the claim, that PortDoor in this instance is related to Chinese state-sponsored hackers, based on the similarities in tactics, techniques, and procedures that have been used by similar Chinese actors against other networks. But it's only the TTPs here that provide that level of confirmation, if we want to use that word, because at the code level, PortDoor does not share any significant similarities with other malware used by Chinese state-sponsor hacking groups, at least known code level code bases. This indicates that PortDoor may be relatively new, and this may be one of the first times it's been executed or implemented out in the wild. That's all for the news this week. I'm your professor of cyber risk. We'll talk again soon. If you like this podcast, share it with your colleagues and friends. Your support is how we are able to continue to make this content. Thank you.